My story is essentially what happens when big data goes bad. What happens when your data is weaponized? You know, I didn't really think about junk mail before I got the quantity and the type that I got. I had no idea. I got a piece of junk mail from Spectrum. Exciting. But when 20 to 30 pieces of junk mail show up on your door every day, it changes your attitude very, very quickly. Let's see, here we go. Let's see, it's urgent, urgent. Supernatural powers have just informed a total of $4 billion. It's a lot of money. Organization for Financial Assistance and Immediate Help. Oh my God. In November of 2013, she broke her hip and was put into the hospital. I was put in charge of all of her paperwork. Every day it was 20 to 30 pieces of junk mail. In a span of 8 months, when she was getting the most junk mail, she received 1,786 pieces of junk mail. I couldn't see the important paperwork. I don't know how's an 87-year-old woman with dementia supposed to see important paperwork? She'd owned her own home for 50 years, and the junk mail destroyed all of that. She was addicted to junk mail. She was giving so much money to scammers in general. She took out a reverse mortgage on her house. Her electricity bill had not been paid. Her water bill had not been paid. The wealth that would have been passed on from her house, or even the house itself, it's all gone. These people started attacking her, and they started saying the worst things possible to get money from her. Oh, it's the same story over and over again. Grandma's got dementia, mom's got dementia, she's sending money to everybody. Because the USPS is theoretically a government entity, people think that the Postal Service is going to protect them from scams, which is pretty much the opposite, because the post office actually has an incentive to send you a scam because they're making money from it.
Millions of victims around the world fall for these scams. In the US, we see hundreds of thousands of victims every month, and the losses are staggering. In the US, these schemes result in the loss of more than $100 million per year.
I really do think that if people knew the extent to which our lives are profiled, I think people would freak out. But it's true, and it's not just what's happening online. It's what we buy, it's how we're living our lives. It's information, and people want it. Data brokers primarily, they will go find data, they will collect it, then it can be used in the data economy to make lists. What kind of interests you have? Do you potentially have diseases? It's not just legitimate businesses that buy data broker lists. It's scammers, it's fraudsters, it's identity thieves. I like to think of it as a data ecosystem. If you were not on the internet at all, and all you were doing is buying stuff, that is one of the greatest sources for junk mail that you can believe. So person buys a home and ding, 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 you get on a new homeowners list. Your mailbox will be completely filled with advertisements for everything that you might imagine you might possibly need for your new home. Does this kind of advertisement pose a risk to you? No, I think a lot of people might be really thrilled to be on a new homeowners list so they can have the services coming to them. But what happens if some of those services are scammers? What if one of the service people has just purchased a data broker list and they want to use it for fraudulent purposes to sell something scammy? The amount of information that we shed, our data trail, is profound. We can be victimized right in the open web, where it's not the dark web. Purchase the data, use it, perpetuate your scam, get the money and get out. Oh, and if your servers and if your payout sections are in another country, it makes it much harder to bring law enforcement to bear. Meanwhile, the people who've been victimized based on their life circumstances or informational circumstances, they're left holding the bag.
This fraud is massive in scale, it is global in scope, and it can be devastating on an individual level.
Dear Mr. Harrison,
Dear Baroness,
Dear Marie,
to whom it concerns,
I found this letter.
thank you for this offer of a sizable check.
I will try and explain why I had no money for your postage and expenses.
I believe that last time I told you that I didn't have $55 to send you, and I still don't have $55 to send you.
Charles has dementia and is in.
I had a
skilled
serious
nursing
fall and landed headfirst on the ground, and I received a broken skull and brain damage.
If I'm too late returning this to you, please send my $50 back.
$15, $20, $43,
I had to get the
$50.
milk and bread, and my money was gone.
I'm still broke, distressed, lonely.
I've many times been scammed
Send
by people in the
check.
Netherlands.
Please don't tell me that you want to help me. I can't keep getting my hopes up.
Well, I kind of got took, money-wise, by the scammers. It was just mailings that I got that I answered because they kept telling me I was going to win this and going to win that. Cars and money and all kinds of stuff like that. That's where all my savings went. I mean, all it does is just takes money that you don't have anymore. I barely scrape by from month to month.
Did you tell anyone about this?
No, I didn't, because I was more or less ashamed. Far enough back, it's hard for me to remember my name sometimes. Most of all of this kind of crap that I got mixed up in came out after I had lost my wife. We were married 30 years when I lost her. When I first got married, I lived in Iola. Went truck driving after that. That's been the biggest majority of my life, was truck driving. I just went to grade school, and that was it. A scam is a scam, that's all I could say. And they're pretty slick. It ain't the postal department's fault. Whatever is tagged to you, they can't do nothing with it but just deliver it to you. Other people are stupidity enough, just like I was, to get sucked into that. It wasn't nobody else's fault but my own. They just thought they had a sucker, and I guess they did have a sucker. It was me. I learned a hell of a lesson.
Consumer protection laws in the United States are built, so there's a health law, there's a couple of laws that protect financial privacy in certain instances, but we don't have an overarching law that protects our data wherever it may go. So our laws are very focused and limited, and that gives a lot of wiggle room for mischief.
Data. For 100 years, it's been our secret weapon, helping us connect people to products that made life easier and inspired generations.
We want to be really careful that we're not overgeneralizing the use of properly permissioned data for proper purposes. The focus really, in my area at least, is to ensure that we are providing responsible data governance practices. In a larger sense, the DMA represents what's best in the data-driven marketing world as it's evolving with all of the tech innovations today. We really have to work hand in glove with regulators.
What would give remedy to the problems that we see? The DMA has an ethics review board, but there's no real enforcement. If the industry looked after itself, a lot could be made better.
There's a whole transaction that happens under self-regulation. If you are found in violation, you could be bumped out of membership. There would be a board action and or referred to authorities. We're happy to report that we actually have most, if not all, companies compliant. You can imagine that they don't want to be named and shamed as being non-compliant with our standards and guidelines.
In today's economy, you, the American consumer, are the commodity that is bought and sold on the open market. And right now, you have no rights. Data brokers are collecting, using, sharing Americans' personal information without your knowledge, without your consent.
Very specific things that could be done right now. The states could act. I think this is incredibly important at a time when laws may not pass through Congress.
More to follow. So, if I may, for the record, Chris Curtis with the Attorney General's Office. The four key elements of this bill are not new or burdensome to industry.
This bill takes a look at the data broker industry, these third parties who people don't even know that they have their data, and just says, okay, come register with the state, tell us who you are. We're looking at companies that buy or collect information on Vermonters that they do not have a personal relationship with, aggregate, package that in some way, and then sell or license it to another party.
This is not an overly broad definition. This is a very narrowly tailored, crafted definition.
So I'm Robbie Adler. I'm the co-founder and president of Faraday. We work with basically consumer-facing businesses and we help them use data to predict what their customers are likely to do, what additional products they might buy, as well as help them use data to find new customers. The way I think the legislation is currently drafted, companies who are very clearly not in this business are acting like a data broker is defined in this legislation. We don't really sell data. I'm using information that we might have about these people to essentially build predictions and make recommendations.
If the definition needs tailoring or needs to come back, then the legislature can come back and do that. But saying that it might scoop up some people who weren't intended, I think is a bad reason not to give Vermonters this information and take this step.
What is a data broker? Who are we regulating? And right now we're saying that data brokers, that very narrow group of people that are only in third parties. This is a question of what about the Googles and the Facebooks and the Expedias of the world?
Yahoo would not be impacted by this legislation. Facebook, not going to be impacted by this legislation.
No, it's not addressing those people. And the reason why is consumers at least know that they have that direct relationship. They can choose to delete Facebook if they want. The problem with sort of these third parties is people don't even realize they have their data. Because a lot of Vermonters and Americans, quite frankly, don't know who these companies are.
The genie's kind of out of the bottle a little bit. Like, I don't think we're gonna be able to like stuff it back in, because like every activity we do, just like our cell phones being on us, right? We're generating data, more and more and more of it. This data is proliferating overwhelmingly, like it's not being done in a secure way.
Data is an important part of the economy right now, getting information, trading of information, but it needs to be done securely and safely and in a way that Vermonters and Americans, consumers in general, are protected and are not put at risk of having their identity stolen or anything like that.
we have to make a decision. What do we value more? Do we value people more? Or do we value, the quality of our lives? Do we value another company's bottom line? The pendulum has swung so far over to the let's use the data side. There's not been a balance. I understand that we're not going to get everything we want, but right now we're getting almost nothing that we need. So that absolutely has to change.